Propped against the budding shrubs so only I could see, the cardboard sign read, Eileen's Peonies. But the words seemed to say, stay with me. Peony 1, our house. Charlie bought the house in spring when we had known each other a year. It was a funny-looking thing, that farmhouse with its faded yellow clapboards and budded interior. Cluster flies clung to the tattered lace curtains left behind by the previous owners, Mr. and Mrs. Jewett, who, according to neighborhood legend, kept a lamp lit on their front porch, a perpetual beacon for travelers. The house, barn, and outbuildings stood vacant for 2 years until Charlie claimed them. Before the closing, Charlie and I would often stop by the house on those early spring evenings. Lilac shrubs hugged the house on either side like a pair of arms. I pushed the branches aside the window on tiptoe, envisioning conditions and a bathroom that looked, according to Charlie, like the head in a filling station. This was when Charlie and I were still exploring our new relationship and the terrain of each other's lives. 2 divorces between us were often more than either of us could handle. When one of us wasn't in a state of emotional chaos, the other was, and I credit him for getting us through despite his tendency to brood. He's the pragmatist in the most desperate, uncomfortable situation, but me, I just hide myself away or lose it. A new life in Vermont had been my plan, but during that spring, home saved me. I missed my children takes away. Though as 20-somethings in their own lives, it was a case of empty nest in reverse. I preoccupied myself with regrets of a failed marriage. It was as if my guilt were putty I carried around in a little pot, taking it out each day, shaping it into a menagerie of grotesque lumps. Those little monsters haunted my dreams, and Charlie knew I suffered. His gentle way of talking with no pressure surely helped persuade me that it would be good and right to stay in Vermont. Peony bushes grace the front yard slope of the house like a beauty mark. If you don't know about peonies, they are the loveliest flower, prolific in this countryside. They remind one of a rose, the symbol of love. But these peonies were famous, too. They were the pride of a neighborhood, noticed by drivers as they navigated the curve above the ledges, a natural geological incline of the Champlain Valley. Neighbors told me the peony story, how Mrs. Jewett nurtured them all the years she lived in the house. The petals of a peony are layered upon each other, much the way a rose's are, but a peony has a fuller, looser appearance. The scent, softer, sweeter than that of a rose, lasts the life of the flower. Roses seem prim. They remind me of an orderly English garden, but peonies have a wildness about them and do okay without much discipline. The peonies reminded me of me. Here I was, not so young anymore, but finally, thank God, grown into full-fledged womanhood. I felt loved, appreciated, and fulfilled. Charlie, the passionate, considerate lover, he knew how to listen, and he was smart, too. He drew my attention to those peonies with his cardboard sign as if it were a road map. See this flower. What does it mean to you? Where do you want to go next? See me. When the peonies finally bloomed that spring, they took over the front yard. Instead of the usual pinks or creams one sees along highways or in random gardens, these peonies were deep red, like plums ready for picking. I chose a few of the fullest blooms, filled an antique glass vase with water, and arranged the peonies just so. Then, as if they were a beacon or a sign, I placed them on the kitchen table inside our house. Robert Frost wrote that fences make good neighbors. Vermonter Maria von Trapp said, it's easy to love your neighbor when she lives 5 miles down the road. Peony 2, the house next door. I often wonder about the meaning of the word neighbor, especially these past few years since Charlie and I built our cottage on a quiet wooded hill off the road and sold our farmhouse next door to Brian. Our home had been on the market for 6 months and was shown 32 times without hint of an offer. Brian came in early spring. He walked into the kitchen, whipped out his digital camera, and clicked away as he scurried between house and yard, breathless with questions. Within 2 days, a contract was signed, and we were thrilled to have our buyer at last. We looked forward to Brian as our new neighbor, our homes separated only by a wide thicket. Though we could barely see the old barn's roof from our new kitchen windows, it didn't matter, because in Vermont, everyone who lives within 5 miles is considered your neighbor. On closing day, the realtors, lawyers, and I gathered around when business had granted me proxy. Brian, last to arrive, seemed distracted. Red-rimmed eyes and a serious 5 o'clock shadow indicated he may have pulled an all-nighter. But I decided to attribute his unkempt appearance to closing day stress. As he sat across from me, no matter how many times I attempted to hold his gaze, he looked away. Maybe it's my Catholic schoolgirl upbringing or freshly minted New England sensibility, but all I wanted was to say hello. He had recently moved to Vermont from California, so I thought he might appreciate a new friend. The title clerk asked Brian, "What made you want to move to Vermont?" He answered, "The movie, Baby Boom." If you've seen the film, you know it's the story of a frazzled Manhattanite who chucks corporate life and retreats to the country. The main character arrives in Vermont with a pot of money and baby in tow, but she questions her move after enduring dried-up water wells, leaky ceilings, and an overdose of solitude. Ultimately, she embraces her new home, new friends, new lover, and Vermont's simple way of life. It's a cute, quirky film. I enjoy viewing it on occasion, but Brian changed his life because of the movie, and I was intrigued. A few days after closing, we realized we owed Brian additional paperwork. Charlie chose to deliver it personally, so we walked the path we had blazed through the woods between the two houses during the months of construction. Brian sort of freaked when Charlie appeared in his backyard like a gnome out of the forest. We probably should have approached Brian's from the road, but we're such innocents that way. We leave our doors unlocked most of the time. Neighbors and friends just knock and walk in. But Brian scolded Charlie and gave orders to call next time. During that first summer, Brian mowed, trimmed, and mulched as if obsessed. He toured the grounds on a small tractor as he cleared away heaps of seasonal debris from the surrounding woods. He planted sod in place of the vegetable garden we had cultivated. On one of my drive-bys, I noticed our Louisa crabapple tree was gone. It had been thriving, but Brian must have dug it up and thrown it onto his ever-smoldering burn heap. Our new neighbor was on a mission to uproot or destroy nearly every perennial, not only ones we planted, but also healthy ancient tamarack and pines that served as landmarks for a century. Several years earlier, when I still lived at the old house, on a 100-degree afternoon, I arrived home at lunchtime to find two bicyclists lounging beneath the shelter of those giant trees. The women sipped water as they took a break from the intense heat. When I pulled up, they waved and smiled. "We hope you don't mind if we rest under the shade for a while," they called. Why would I mind, I thought. The trees belong to God or nature, certainly not to me. As custodian, I care for them, but I'm hard put to say how anyone can own a tree. But now we live next door to a small strip pine. Brian smoothed the ground so that it looked like a well-vacuumed carpet, rather than the wild place it had been for so long, even before I came to know it, as if he didn't hate any trace of us or those who came before us. Months passed. Despite my angst and subsequent grudge over Brian's land management methods, I softened my attitude and invited him to stop by on Thanksgiving morning. He not only accepted, but arrived at the door bearing a tray of home-baked cookies. He said he had bragged to his California friends that morning about his invitation to the neighbors. "Wow, wish we were there," they replied. It must have seemed to him like a quintessential movie scene. We gathered around our kitchen island and sipped coffee. Brian shared his plans for the farmhouse, which included a fancy brick walkway and privacy fence of arborvitae. At that Thanksgiving coffee clutch, Charlie and I asked Brian a question we'd been dying to ask. Or rather, Charlie spoke up because I didn't have the nerve. But if I were to have opened my mouth, I might have blurted words not in keeping with my usual ladylike manner. The peonies we had loved and strove to preserve were gone, and we wanted to understand why. Co-workers and neighbors had been asking me for months, "What happened to the peonies?" As if I had participated in the betrayal of an entire community. Brian said he mowed them over just as they had begun to bloom that first spring. Each time he mowed, he gave them another good swipe with the mower. He said it was swagger, as cocky as could be. And with every swipe, the chance of those peonies' survival lessened. If only my drive to work each morning were in the opposite direction, I wouldn't have to pass Brian so often. Perhaps then the absence of those peonies wouldn't hurt so much. At first, when we realized the peonies had vanished, Charlie and I dared ourselves to dress in black and stalk through the woods by dark of night, like cat burglars or a SWAT team executing a strategic strike. There was still a chance to dig them up and save them if we acted swiftly. But it didn't seem like the neighborly thing to do. So we never did, and now we live as peaceable strangers to the house next door.